Okay, this is section 8.3. On 8.3, we just did arithmetic sequencing series, and that's where you added or subtracted the same thing every time. Well, now another type of ones that we have a formulas for are geometric sequences and series. On these, you multiply by the same thing every time. So on these, instead of having a common difference, they have a common ratio. So we use R for common ratio. Just like when we were finding the common difference, we took a term and subtracted the term before it, a sub n minus a sub n minus 1. Well, for the common ratio R, you do similar to that, except now we divide. So a sub n divided by a sub n minus 1. That means you pick a term and divide it by the term that comes before it. If you do that and get the same answer every time, then it's geometric. So it's a common ratio is geometric. The same, we use a lot of the same nomenclature we used before. A sub n is still the nth term. A sub 1 is the first term. S sub n is the sum of the first so many terms. Now we have a rule or a formula for geometric. So the nth term, we have a formula for the nth term, and it looks like this. We take a sub 1, the first term, times the common ratio, and then the common ratio has an exponent of n minus 1. So a lot of times our answer for this term is pretty simple because you don't really do much with this. You're just going to put R for the base and you're going to leave the n minus 1 up there. To give an example here is if I gave you one, I said the first term is 2 and the common ratio is 3. Well, the first term is 2, so we put in 2 for a sub 1, goes right there. The common ratio is 3, we put in 3 for R. Now, remember, you cannot multiply these two things together. As much as you might be tempted to, you can't because the 3 has an exponent on it. So do not multiply the 2 and the 3 together. So if we're doing a problem like here, first we're going to decide if these are geometric. So here's our sequence. Again, we're going to divide. So we take 12 divided by 6. That gives us 2. We take 20 divided by 12. Again, we're picking a term and we're dividing it by the term before it. 20 divided by 12, well, that's not 2. So this one is not geometric. We know that already because 20 divided by 12 is, what, 5/3? So we have to get the same thing every time. R is a constant. This one, if we check this one, so we're going to take 64 divided by 256. Well, let's see, 64 goes into 256 4 times, so that's the same as 1/4. If we take 16 divided by 64, 16 goes into 64 4 times, 1/4. 4 divided by 16, 1/4. And 1 divided by 4, of course, is 1/4. So this one is geometric, and R equals 1/4. That's all there is to tell them if it's geometric or not. Here we multiplied by 1/4 every time, so we multiplied by a fraction. You can multiply by a fraction, you can multiply by a whole number, you can multiply by a negative number. Okay? Now this next one, these are geometric. We can check first, like here to see, 15 divided by 5 is 3, 45 divided by 15 is 3, 135 divided by 45 is 3. So this is geometric, and R equals 3. Now, to find a rule for the nth term, we're going to take that formula we mentioned before, a sub n equals a sub 1 r to the n minus 1, and we're just going to plug in the first term and r. So a sub n equals the first term, which is 5, times r, which is 3, and that has an exponent of n minus 1, and that's your answer. Then you cannot do anything else to that. Do not multiply the 5 and the 3. In fact, I almost like it better sometimes if you put this in parentheses, if that would help keep you from multiplying that. Or this one. Let's see if it's geometric. If we take a negative 44 divided by 88, well, 44 goes into 88 twice, so that's a negative 1/2. 22 divided by negative 44, 22 goes into 44 twice, that's a negative 1/2. And negative 11 divided by 22, that's a negative 1/2. So this is geometric, and R equals a negative 1/2. Now again, we just plug that into our formula. A sub n equals a sub 1, which is 88, times r, which is negative 1/2, to the n minus 1. And that's your answer. All right, now those are pretty basic ones. Now let's go to one that's a little bit trickier, where they don't give you the first term. So here, they gave us the fourth term is 12 and r equals 2. So similar to what we did with arithmetic, we need to find a sub 1, because we need that for our formula. So let's plug into our formula. Here we're going to let this be a sub n. So a sub n is 12. So if we use that same formula, we have 12 equals a sub 1, which we don't know, times r, which we know is 2. So that's times r to the n minus 1. Well, here, since we're going to use this for our nth term, that means n equals 4. So this is r to the 4 minus 1. So that is 12 equals a sub 1 times r cubed. I'm sorry, I forgot, I didn't substitute in enough. Sorry, that we have to substitute in 2 for r. Sorry about that. I forgot about substituting in 2. So that's a sub 1 times 2 to the third. Well, 2 to the third is 8. So now if we divide by 8, we get a sub 1 is 12/8, which we can reduce if we divide by 4. That's 3/2. Now that's all we need for our formula. A sub n equals a sub 1, which now we know is 3/2, times r. Keep not wanting to substitute in for that r, times 2 to the n minus 1. And that's our equation. Or this one, same thing. This is a sub n, so n equals 5. So we substitute into our formula. A sub n is 32, equals a sub 1, which we're trying to find, times r, which is 2/3, to the n minus 1, so that's 5 minus 1. So if we want to solve that, that's 2/3 to the 4th power. Remember, to take a fraction to the 4th, take the top to the 4th, so 2 to the 4th is 16. 3 to the 4th is 81. So 2/3 to the 4th looks like that. Now, to get a1 by itself, we're going to divide by that. Remember, dividing is like multiplying by the reciprocal. So we're going to multiply by that. Well, let's see. 16 goes to 32 twice. 2 times 81 is 162. So now we know a sub 1. Now we're just going to plug a sub 1 and r in up here. So a sub n equals a sub 1, which is 162, times r, which we know is 2/3, to the n minus 1. And that's our rule or formula. I tend to always call them formulas. In here, they tend to call them rules. It's the same thing. All right. Now, the next one is if you're given 2 terms. So here before they gave us 1 term in the common ratio, here all they give us is 2 terms. So we have to find 2 things. We need to find the common ratio, we need to find r, and then we need to find a sub 1. So first, to find r, if we plug into that formula twice, like let's use this for a sub n, well that would give us 12 equals a sub 1 times r to the 2 minus 1. So 12 equals a sub 1 r. If we plug this one into there, we get negative 768 equals a sub 1 r to the 5 minus 1. So negative 768 equals a sub 1 r to the fourth. Now let's solve each one of those for a sub 1. So r here, a sub 1 equals 12 over r. Here, a sub 1 equals negative 168 over r to the fourth. Now these both equal a sub 1, so they should be equal to each other. So we have 12 over r equals a negative 168 over r to the fourth. Well, now if we set those equal to each other, we have a negative 168r equals 12r to the fourth. So if we divide by r, that's r to the third, and we divide by 12, 12 goes into negative 14 times. Sorry, that's a negative 768. I can't read my own writing. That was a negative 768. So 12 goes into that. Let's see, 12 goes into 76 6 times. 48, so negative 64. Well, now if we cube root both sides, we get r equals the cube root of negative 64, which is negative 4. Now we need to find a sub 1, so let's go back to one of these. Let's say we use this first one and do what we did on the last problem. We have 12, or go back to right here and now plug in for r, a sub 1 times negative 4 to the first power. So a sub 1 equals negative 3. So now we have everything we need. A sub n equals a sub 1, which is negative 3, times r, which was negative 4 to the n minus 1. This in the same way. They gave us A3 is 20, A6 is negative 160. If you look at how this ended up, notice we took this power to the n minus 1. So if we took a to the 6 divided by a to the 3, well, that was negative 160 divided by 20. Well, that equals r. 6 minus 3 is 3. That equals r cubed. Well, negative 160 divided by 20 is a negative 8 equals r cubed. So r equals negative 2. If you follow that, that's just a little bit of a shortcut. Here, we went from A3 to A6. So if you took 6 to 3, that was negative 160 divided by 180. This would be like r to the 6th divided by r cubed. So this is like r to the 6th divided by r cubed, which is r cubed. We can just solve from there. That's kind of a shortcut way to get r. If you divide your two a values, a sub n values, and subtract your two exponents, that's r. If that makes any sense. So now we found r. We can go back to our formula and pick one. Let's say we pick this first one. We have a sub n, which is 20, equals a sub 1 times a negative 2 to the n minus 1. Well, that'd be 3 minus 1. So 20 equals a sub 1, negative 2 squared is 4. So a sub 1 is 5. That's everything we need. So a sub n equals a sub 1, which is 5, times r, which is negative 2, to the n minus 1. So you can do that either way to find r. You can substitute in each one, set them equal to each other, equal to a1, and solve for r. Or kind of the shortcut way is divide, take the one that's farther along, divided by the first one, so second divided by first, and do the same thing here. If you subtract the n, 6 minus 3 is 3, so that's equal to r cubed. That's a shortcut way to do that. Okay, so that's finding a term formula. Now the last thing is finding a sum. Well, to find the sum, we have a formula for that. This is probably the most complicated formula in here. The sum formula looks like this. Out front, we have a sub 1, our first term. Then in here, we're going to have a fraction. We have 1 minus r to the nth. And notice just the r to the nth power, not the whole thing. All over 1 minus r. So here, if I wanted to find the sum of this series, the first thing you need to find is we're going to need r, and we're going to need a1. Well, notice it starts with k equals 1. So a1, if we plug in 1, that's going to be 4 times 3 to the 0. Well, 3 to the 0 is 1, so that's just 4. So there's a1. Now we need to let's find a2. Let's plug in 2. That's going to be 4 times 3 to the first power. 4 times 3 is 12. So this gives us two things. One, now we know a sub 1 is 4. We also know if a2 is 12 and a1 is 4, r equals a sub 2 divided by a sub 1. So 12 divided by 4, we also know that r is 3. Now let's plug it into our formula. So here we have 10. So the sum of the first 10 equals a sub 1, which is 4, times 1 minus r. Notice n is 10. Again, I keep forgetting to plug in for r. So r is 3. So 1 minus 3 to the 10th over 1 minus 3. This one you definitely want to do on your calculator. So on the top, we're going to take 1 minus 3 and then hit your exponent key. And your exponent key is the one right here, the caret key. 1 minus 3 to the 10th. And I'm going to divide that by 1 minus 3, it's negative 2. So we get that. Now we're going to multiply by 4. So S10 equals 118,096. Okay. Same one with this one. Here we want to find the sum here. So first, let's find A1. So it starts with k equals 1. If we plug in 1, that's 1/2 times 5 to the first. So that's 5/2. Now we need to find A2. If we plug in 2, that's going to be 1/2 times 5 squared, which is 25/4. So R equals 25/4 divided by 5/2. Well, that's 25/4 times the reciprocal, 2/5. Let's see, we can simplify here. Divide both of these by 2. Divide both of these by 5. We get 5/2. So that's everything we need. So now we're going to take the sum. Here there's 6 of them. The sum of the first 6 is A1, which we know is 5/2, times 1 minus, R is 5/2, so 5/2 to the 6th over 1 minus 5/2. You can read my writing there. So if we do that on our calculator, so 1 minus, I'm going to put parentheses, 5/2 exponent 6 divided by parentheses 1 minus 5/2 and take that times 5/2. Let's try that over on my calculator just to make sure. So I'm going to take, on the top, I'm going to take 1 minus parentheses 5/2 to the 6th divided by parentheses 1 minus 5/2. Yep, the same thing. Times 5/2. 5/2 is just 2.5. I get 405.234. I'll just write it all the way out. Normally we would cut that off. Calculator is really handy on these because they're really tricky with they'll give these sum formulas. I would definitely use that calculator. And that's it for 8.3.